Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise. I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár, and this is Movie Night Tonight. Every single week here, we watch a new film and we discuss it in depth, with each month having a new theme. We're currently in the month of January, which is our month of boxing movies, and the film we are discussing tonight is 2004's $1 Million Baby. Once again, I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'm joined by Rob Giachinta. Rob, thanks for being here.
I didn't have a choice.
Per usual. So we're talking about $1 Million Baby, and this is a full spoiler discussion. We are talking about this movie as if you watched it with us. And we're going to kick off this discussion talking about, first, our first impressions of film and roughly how many times we've seen it. So, Rob, what are your first impressions of the film?
So, like you said, me or you hasn't seen it. And I have to say this was really excellent. And I mean, I haven't seen all the movies it was nominated for Best Picture, but like sometimes I hear people say like, "Oh, it's a little overrated." I don't know. I thought it was a great movie filled with really both the lead performances were fantastic in this movie, and the boxing was really good in it too. Even though they're kind of shorter fights, there's no like long kind of like boxing scene like you get in some other movies, but overall this is a great sports movie. I don't know how rewatchable it is just because of the last like act is pretty like devastating, but it is something that I think everybody should see at least once.
Yeah, nice. So, like you said, this was also my first time seeing this movie, and I also really like this movie a lot. I think it's very well directed. All the performances are great. Like you said, the boxing, it's really good, even though they're like 15-second fights. And we'll get into all that in a little bit. And like you said as well, I haven't seen all the other movies that were up for Best Picture the same year, but just based upon seeing this movie, I have no complaints with it winning. The movie was up for a whole bunch of Oscars, so it won Best Picture, won Best Lead Actress for Hilary Swank, won Best Supporting Actor for Morgan Freeman, and it won Best Director for Clint Eastwood. It was also nominated for Best Lead Actor for Clint Eastwood, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Editing. And there's actually, regarding the Oscars, there's some interesting history with this. So Paul Haggis wrote the screenplay for $1 Million Baby, and he was originally, back when it was kind of in production, he was planning on directing the film. And so Clint Eastwood was attached as an actor for the film. He was going to play the role that he ends up playing in the movie. And then Clint Eastwood really wanted to direct, and Paul Haggis was also, he wrote Crash and was working on directing that film, so he kind of stepped aside from directing duties. He let Clint Eastwood kind of take that over, and so Paul Haggis went off and did Crash. Clint Eastwood did $1 Million Baby. So Crash was made and originally released in 2004, the same year as $1 Million Baby. However, it wasn't in consideration for the Oscars for that same year that $1 Million Baby came out and won Best Picture, because the requirements for a movie to be eligible for the Oscars is that it has to play one full week, at least one full week, in both New York and LA. And it didn't in 2004. It didn't play the full week in LA.
That ended up, working out for the best because it ended up winning Best Picture. But, like, how did they bluff? Like, how did they not have it in LA? Like, I don't understand, like, how that mistake happened.
Yeah,
because they obviously must have known that, right? I don't know.
Well, it might have been
part
of a strategic move.
Did it come out of January of that year?
So I believe it was. I don't know the full extent of it. I think it just had a very limited release the very end of 2004, and then it actually got its real release in 2005, and so then it was technically, by the Oscars counted as a 2005 film, and then went on for 2006. I'm curious to know
when it came out in 2005, though, because that'd be pretty crazy if it came out in January and then it was able to stick with the awards recognition for that long.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. But, speaking to your point about why they did this, there might have been some strategy to it, because, of course, $1 Million Baby won Best Picture, Crash won Best Picture, so I don't think they were made by the same studio, but there might have been a little bit of strategy of kind of spacing it out a little bit. Oh, were they? Well, then that would make a little bit more sense as to why they spaced them out. But what's interesting is that Paul Haggis is the only person to have written 2 consecutive Best Picture winners. He also produced both films, and Million Dollar Baby is actually the first produced screenplay that Paul Haggis had.
He had never written anything?
Well, he had written stuff, but nothing had been made up until Million Dollar Baby.
Wow.
And so then for that movie to go on, win Best Picture, the film that he writes and directs that wins Best Picture the next year, that's a crazy back-to-back time for Paul Haggis. So I just thought that was an interesting thing. And also, on the note of the Oscars, when Clint Eastwood won Best Director, he became the oldest Best Director winner at the age of 74.
And I know, which Million Dollar Baby, like, it was kind of what it's happened with Clint Eastwood's last 2 movies with The Mule and Richard Jewell. They were kind of made in the same year they were released, and they kind of just like sprung it on audience. Like, we're just going to release this in December, and then it kind of snowballed from there because of how good it was.
Yeah, Million Dollar Baby, it had a December release for 2004. They hadn't even begun shooting by July of that year.
Same with, I know the Richard Jewell was filming in July.
Yeah.
So that he gets films done very fast.
Yeah. He's an efficient director. Yeah. I think it just kind of shows that Clint Eastwood's been in the business for a very long time. He knows how movies are made. Yeah. He knows production schedules. He knows how to get it done, and he can just kind of, even though now he's still making movies in his 90s, which is crazy to me. Considering, so we're talking about Clint Eastwood becoming oldest Best Director winner at age 74, and he's still making movies. He just had, like you said, Richard Jewell just came out last year. There are some people who are at the age of 74 who are not mentally with it anymore to be able to do anything, let alone win Best Director at 74 and then all these years later still be making movies. Now, granted, Richard Jewell didn't do that much at the box office, but people seem to really like it.
It was very good.
The Mule got good reviews. 15-17 to Paris, not so much.
I didn't see that.
I didn't see that one either.
But Sully was good.
Sully was very good.
American Sniper.
Yeah. So Clint Eastwood, in his later years, has had tremendous success. But probably of the latter half of his career, because he had all of his roles that he was starring in, Big Bad and the Ugly and whatnot. The latter half of his career, I think Million Dollar Baby is probably like the shining jewel.
I'm pretty sure he had like 3 Oscar nominations pretty much almost in a row with Mystic River, this, and then Letters to Iwo Jima, like all in like the early 2000s, which is crazy.
So he's a very productive, busy person. But let's talk a little bit about the film. So, like we mentioned, this is our month of boxing movies. So far in this month, we are 3/4 of the way through it. We watched Rocky and we watched Raging Bull. Now, this movie is very different from those movies, but there's also some strong similarities. So I just wanted to get your thoughts from the outset before we dive into it. Looking at Rocky, looking at Raging Bull, and now looking at Million Dollar Baby, a movie that most definitely was influenced by those kinds of films, as well as other boxing movies and sports movies that came before it, as well as with Clint Eastwood's own personal kind of directing style that he brings to it. How do you see Million Dollar Baby within the context of those other films that we've watched and discussed?
I think it's a lot. It is an underdog story, like some of the other, like especially Rocky, in which we see someone that was pretty much came from nothing, has no real education or anything, but has a passion for boxing and is willing to do anything to succeed at it. Yeah, and I'd say this movie is a lot similar to Rocky, especially. Yeah, more or less Raging Bull.
Yeah. I would say, so I think we definitely see with this movie, in the same fashion that we get with Rocky and Raging Bull, is that the centerpiece of the movie is a relationship, and the boxing is sort of a backdrop. I think there's more boxing in this movie than either of those movies. Because with Rocky and Raging Bull, I feel like most of the time they were a drama, and occasionally they had some fights sprinkled throughout the film, whereas the focus of those movies, like the focus of Rocky is Rocky and Adrian. I was blanking on her name. Yeah. That's like the focus of the movie, and then the boxing you have at the very beginning, at the very end. Raging Bull, the focus is on Jake LaMotta and his relationships and dynamics with other people, and you have the boxing matches sprinkled throughout, but it's mostly that. With Million Dollar Baby, yes, the focus is Frankie and Maggie and their relationship, but their relationship in the movie and their dynamic is entirely rooted in the fights and in the boxing. And so it's not so much of we have all this long form drama and then cut to a couple boxing matches and then go back to that. It's all woven together. And I feel like in that sense, that sort of makes Million Dollar Baby a little bit more of a cohesive boxing movie, whereas the other ones were a little bit more staggered in terms of the ratio of drama to boxing.
I agree.
But I do think that's what makes these movies work so well, is having that sort of human drama element to it. And one of the reasons I bought so much into this movie was the chemistry and relationship between Frankie and Maggie.
And I hate to say, Hilary Swank is an actress who I know she's a 2-time Academy Award winner for this film and another film, but seeing some of her other films, I'm not always on board with her. I have to say she was excellent in this movie. Mm-hmm. I totally was rooting for her the whole time. And Clint Eastwood is I think he's sometimes underrated as an actor, but this is definitely his best performance that I've seen, too. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a lot of his westerns, but he was really good in this movie.
Yeah, all the performances were great. Morgan Freeman was really good in this movie.
Too, yeah. It was a lot of narration, though. I feel like his Oscar win was sort of like a celebration of Morgan Freeman almost, we see with a lot of Oscar wins. But, good for him. I'd say he deserves it. He's a great performer. I thought it was interesting. We see a lot of actors in this movie who, this came out in 2004, and now I think these actors are like Mike Coulter,
this was his first film he'd ever acted in.
Oh, really? And now, the show's canceled, but he was Luke Cage.
Anthony Mackie.
Anthony Mackie's the Falcon. Jay Baruchel.
Michael Pena.
Yeah, him too, yep.
And Ant-Man. There's some MCU people in here. But yeah, no, we do see a couple actors who were then pretty much unknowns who have kind of gone on to be bigger names now. And I find it funny that Michael Pena is also in Crash.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so going back to the narration, because I think that's an interesting point about this movie. When it started with Morgan Freeman's narration, my first kind of thought was, they're like, well, if we have Morgan Freeman in the movie, he's got to narrate the movie.
You gotta get busy living or get busy dying.
Exactly. But then at the very, very, very end, they reveal what the narration was, and that Morgan Freeman was writing a letter to Frankie's daughter.
Now, that's narration I like, because it seems like it was actually almost realistic in a way. It wasn't just someone telling a story from the ethos or whatever. Yeah. It was someone just reading a letter they were writing. Or whatever. Yeah. So I like that, because narration, honestly, sometimes I can find a little bit lazy, but I think they ended up paying it off in the end, like you said.
I definitely prefer narration that's diegetic to the story and to the narrative. When it's a letter, when it's someone telling a story, when it's any of those kinds of things. There's very few times, I think a movie like Fight Club, which you haven't seen, but
I didn't even know there was narration.
But a movie like that where the narration is so stylized, it works for that kind of movie. But in general, unless if there's some sort of inner movie purpose or reason for the narration, I don't generally like narration, because like you said, I think it can be a way for a movie to just tell you information without actually showing it to you.
Christmas Story, sorry. I don't know. That's what I thought with that one.
That's a little different, but I think that's a different discussion for another time. Actually, for those listening, go back into the archives of Movie Night Tonight. If you go back to season 1, you'll find our discussion of A Christmas Story.
That was probably my favorite one.
That was a fun one. But yeah, if you're interested, go back and check that out. And I'm sure we talked about the narration then. But going back to Million Dollar Baby. So, like I was saying, that relationship between the two of them, their chemistry, the performances, that was the beating heart of this movie. And so I loved the arc that Clint Eastwood had, especially regarding Maggie and how he felt about her, that he had over the course of the film. So, in relation to this, one of the things that we've talked about, more so with Raging Bull than with Rocky, but there were elements of it in Rocky, was this idea of these boxing movies taking on themes and commentary on toxic masculinity. We see that a lot in Raging Bull, in how Jake LaMotta kind of reacts and relates to other people and his anger, and how that sort of character flaws that he has led him to be in a profession that is largely violent, like boxing. With Rocky, we talked about it in Rocky's inability to express his emotions, and he kind of hides that with thinking, I'm not too smart, I can only use my body, and he is in boxing. And we do see the commentary on toxic masculinity in this film, but what's interesting about it is it's through the lens of Frankie as opposed to the boxer.
Yeah.
And I think that was really cool. So in the very beginning, Frankie is refusing to take on Maggie. He's saying he doesn't train girls. And he sort of has this view that women are lesser fighters than men. It's not worth my time to train a woman to be a fighter because women can't be as good of a fighter as a man can. And and we do see throughout the film, at least in the very beginning, he commonly associates crying. He says it specifically with crying, and many times with emotions, as having negatively with being feminine. That I think at one point he was talking with Morgan Freeman's character Eddie, and he was saying, "Are you going to start crying because we already have one girl?" You know, and so we see sort of these rigid ideas that Frankie has about what does it mean to be a man, what does it mean to be a woman, and looking at something like boxing as being rigidly and strictly male. And then over the course of the film, as he spends more time with Maggie, as he actually gets invested in her as a fighter, that changes. By the end, well, first of all, he shows a lot of love and affection for Maggie. He's kissing her cheek at the end. He's hugging her. He deeply cares about her. And then even something like his views on crying or showing emotion changes. By the end, when he's with the priest, he's openly weeping and he's crying when he turns off her machine. And so these were little subtler things that kind of happened over the course of the film. And I think it was, one, keeping in line with themes that are common in the boxing genre that we saw in Rocky and in Raging Bull, but it also made for a really great character arc for Frankie and a great arc for the movie.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's like I always we get situations with these broken people, and they both come from, I believe, broken families, because Clint Eastwood has a strange relationship with his daughter, and he's looking to fill that void in a way. And Hilary Swank's character, she's looking to she doesn't really like her mother's. Honestly, I mean, pardon my language, is a piece of shit, freaking scum. And she's looking for a father figure, and they both are able to kind of complete each other's lives a bit, even though it is rocky to begin with. I mean, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But
turbulent.
She's very persistent in trying to get her to be her manager, and he says no and no. But eventually, I think he realizes that, maybe honestly, a lot of it might have just fell on that he didn't have Mike Coulter's boxer anymore. But then I think once he realized how special she could be, I think he was on board with training her. Yeah.
So you were touching on how, because we've talked about the characters having character flaws that kind of drive them towards boxing. And we were just talking about the flaws of Frankie as a character, but the flaws of Maggie as a character too. You were touching upon this a little bit earlier. Her biggest flaws is that she isn't really going anywhere in life. She's sort of in this stagnant place, and she doesn't see her life, unless if it works out for her boxing-wise, she doesn't feel that her life is going to go anywhere else. She has no other place to go other than this route. And so for her, this is her one shot to do something with her life. And I think, especially when we get to the end, and we can talk about it because it's a huge part at the very end. I think one of the reasons why she feels ultimately, after some time has passed, content to end her life and to make that decision is that she accomplished what she wanted to accomplish. Her life was not going anywhere. I mean, that one could argue that that's a mindset of an individual and that could be overcome, but her character, Maggie, from her perception and her point of view, she did not think her life could go anywhere else if she was not going to boxing. And she accomplished what she wanted to accomplish with boxing. She went as far as she could, and there was nowhere else for her to go once she ended up in her condition. And so that's why she ultimately decided it's time for me to end it.
And I like how this movie has a lot of kind of questions, like, makes you question, what would you do in this situation? Because if you think, if you were her, would you rather just been a waitress your whole life, like, friggin' working your ass off for little to no pay, living in some shack? Or would you like to live your dream, and while there are going to be harsh consequences, you will feel fulfilled in the end?
Yeah.
And then we also get, like, another I mean, we can maybe save this or we can talk about it now. Questions of, if you're Clint Eastwood's character, what do you do? Do you put her out of her misery, or do you not? I wanted to know what you thought on that.
Well, this is sort of just like a personal view of mine, that I am completely okay with the idea of assisted suicide, in that if a person of conscious mind is able to uncoerced say that I want to end my life, and that is their decision, that they should be able to.
So, like you said, a conscious mind being able... When people are not conscious, we have the right to kill them. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like, what's...
usually if a person goes into a coma or something, they'll designate somebody to make that decision for them if they are not of a conscious mind.
Yeah, so I agree. This assisted suicide, I think, should be especially for someone like her. Like, what kind of life is that? In my opinion, like, you can't move, you can't I can totally see why she chose that route.
And it's not to say that other people who are in that same situation, that there is any right or wrong decision to be made. It's all about what is specific to that person. There are people, like, in this character's point of view, in this character's place, she wanted to box, and that's all she wanted to do with her life. And once she was in this condition and this situation, she's no longer able to do that. And so for her, it is more worth it, is more valuable to end her life than to continue on the way that it was. Yeah. For other people, they might be in the same situation, and that's not the same way that they view their life, and they would rather keep going than to end it. It's all based upon what the individual wants. But going to Frankie being in that situation, do I, don't I? I'm curious if Maggie was not conscious, if she was in the same state, but she wasn't able to say or express to Frankie, this is what I want to do, would Frankie have actually pulled the plug on?
Well, I would say probably, then wouldn't someone be able to pull the plug on her anyways, because she wouldn't be conscious?
Well, if she designated Frankie as the person to make the decision of whether she continued to live or die, I'm wondering, would Frankie actually choose to still turn it off?
Yeah, I think so, because even at that, I think it makes it even easier at that decision. I think it makes it harder with her actually being able to talk and stuff like that.
But when she's conscious and able to actually talk to him, she says, this is what I want, as opposed to when she's unconscious. She's not able to tell him, this is explicitly what I want. It's on him to make that decision of what is best for her without her giving any way in.
But I think most people, if they know there is no chance really of anybody coming out of a coma, they usually make the decision to terminate them. But I don't know. You never know. Maybe he would have. I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. This movie does give the audience many moral dilemmas.
Yep.
And I think that's something, at least in Rocky and Raging Bull, we haven't really had that to this degree at all. And I think while Rocky is an uplifting story and Raging Bull is more of a cautionary tale, this gives questions for us to think about. And I really like that regard. One thing of the movie that I thought was a little bit weaker was the use of some of the side characters. Like, you have Jay Baruchel as Danger. You have Anthony Mackie as Chanel. Now, Chanel doesn't really have that many scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And when he is in it, he has, like, a very specific purpose. I gotta be honest, I didn't like Jay Baruchel. I mean, granted, I don't think you're supposed to like his character, but I just thought every time he was on screen, he didn't do anything in the movie, and it just kind of felt like whenever he was on screen, he was filler.
I kind of liked by the end of it, I kind of liked his relationship with Morgan Freeman. But, like, I don't know, I was a little sad, like, when he went in the ring and got his ass kicked, and then all of a sudden he was just gone. Like, I was like, oh, man, like, this is a guy that was kind of like, in a way, he was like, what's the main character's name?
Maggie.
He really was like Maggie, except he was less skilled. He didn't seem like he had much of a life going on, and he wanted to be a boxer so bad, and he was there every day training, trying to become a boxer, and I felt bad for him, and I appreciate people who like just cannot quit at something and just keep doing it till they get good at it.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, for me at least, I felt like...
He was, like, annoying, though, as a kid.
Yeah,
like,
so so there was that. He was annoying, but I feel like the ultimate end of what his character was and the purpose it served in the story, I didn't feel like it was significant enough because by the end, when he does get his ass kicked and he's gone and he never appears in the rest of the story, it just felt...
No, he comes back.
After... Wait, what part does he come back?
He comes back at the end.
The very end? When?
Yeah, remember Morgan Freeman's like, oh, and all of a sudden someone showed up. Like, he shows up at the end.
Oh, I must have missed that part. Okay.
I promise you, he shows up.
Okay. I'm not down.
That's what made me actually like it, because like he showed up at the end.
I must have missed that part, so maybe I would have liked him a little bit more if I... But I don't know, I just felt like it just kind of felt a little bit like a distraction when he was on screen, and it was kind of taking away. I do love that scene, though, when Chanel is fighting Danger, and then Morgan Freeman puts on the glove.
That was awesome.
One-handed.
Yeah.
Takes him
One
down.
eye.
Yeah, one-handed, takes him out, and Chanel pops out the tooth. Like, I thought that was a great moment, and it showed he still has it. One thing, I don't know if you were looking for this or not, but something we were talking about in the previous episodes for this month was how they chose to shoot the fights.
Yeah.
Because with Rocky, it was shot outside of the ring, so it's sort of a spectator's point of view. And then Raging Bull, it was the first time that a boxing movie had shot inside of the ring, and that was Martin Scorsese's conscious decision to keep the movie from Jake LaMotta's point of view. And in this movie, I was looking and I realized it was shot outside of the ring. And I think the biggest reason for that is that the movie's ultimately from Frankie's point of view.
Yeah.
And he is the main character. We're kind of following his story. We're viewing everything through his eyes. And so it would make sense that since he's outside of the ring, we're outside of the ring with him, watching Maggie along with him.
I kind of felt it almost in a way that it was in the ring, but like from a wide aspect almost. Yeah. I don't know. But there was some of it, I think, from like more of a spectator kind of view too. Mm-hmm. But I really liked the way they shot the scenes for the boxing. It was really good.
I think probably, and I think this goes without saying, the most devastating moment of this movie.
Oh yeah,
is when she gets hit.
What an asshole, that lady.
And
she should have been disqualified before that then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, in my opinion.
And
she shouldn't have been, like, she been doing all that shit, like all her, like, she had a bad reputation.
Yeah.
She shouldn't have been allowed to box anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these are real characters. So.
Yeah. But, oh, man, when that happened, so let's talk for a second, because I know you kind of knew this whole ending already. Yeah. So how, when you saw that scene happen, how much did you know going in, and how did that influence your perception of the whole scene and the weight of it?
I mean, I didn't know necessarily how she ended up as a cripple, but I knew she ended up as a cripple and that he pulls the plug on her. But I didn't know, like, how it was going to happen, but I assumed, like, when this was like the big fight, I was like, well, it must happen in here. But I didn't know it was gonna be on Cheap Shot though. That kind of like pissed me off. It sucked. And then like she like goes towards that chair, and I was like, oh no, that looked horrible.
Yeah. So I knew that one of the characters, I didn't know it was her specifically, but I knew somebody ended up in the situation where they became physically handicapped and then they made the decision to end their life. And I didn't know who it was in my head. I don't know why specifically. I just kind of thought it was Clint Eastwood. Yeah. But then, so when that happens where she takes the shot and then Maggie is falling and hits her neck on that stool, like I was in like shock. Like, even though like as soon as it happened, I'm like, okay, so I know where it goes from here. But still, that moment of you just see her neck collide with the stool and gross. You hear the sound, and I was just like, I was covering my face. Like, that was such a powerful moment. I can imagine the first people like sitting in the theater watching this happen, and all of a sudden, like, the wind is just taken out of you because you're not expecting this, and then the whole tone, the whole movie changes, and it ends on a grisly note. The whole last act, and so it just, honestly though, like, power to them, the filmmakers, because that's a bold way to make a movie. It's I mean, we look at Rocky, and Rocky's supposed to be uplifting and inspirational. We finish that movie and we're like, yeah, we want to conquer the world. And Raging Bull's a little bit darker, but you're still, like, it's a Martin Scorsese movie, so it has its own sort of unique ups and downs. And then for this movie to start and have, for so much of it, you're like, you're feeling upbeat and you're rooting for her and things are going great, and then to just completely shatter that for the whole last act, and then to walk out on such a downer note, that's a really bold decision. And that
risky.
It was.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason this movie took like 4 years to get made before it got funding. Warner Brothers didn't want to put up the money for it, and a lot of producers overlooked, and they're like, it's too depressing of a movie. We don't want to make this.
And even like I thought this was weird in the opening titles, I don't think, like, I think Warner Brothers was involved, but it looked like they didn't put that much money behind it, because like it opens up, it doesn't open up with like the Warner Brothers logo, it opens up with something else, and then
I think they split the investment with I think it's New Line,
or I think it was something called Lakeshore or something. That was like,
that might have been an additional production
company. Well, that's weird. I don't know, but yeah. Well, I bet after this, I think Warner Brothers has done all Clint Eastwood's films ever since.
And they were already doing like a lot of his movies, but then this one, they're like, we don't really want to put in the money. And then I guess now they learn, okay, you don't doubt Clint Eastwood. If he's passionate about something, it's probably going to turn out to be at least good.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, not to get off topic, but I'm glad, a studio like Warner Brothers likes to take chances. Like, I mean, we see a studio like Disney who kind of plays it safe or whatever, but then we have a studio like Warner Brothers. We need those studios, I think, to get movies like this or The Joker like we got. Because, I mean, like, I love, like, the Disney movies, but, like, a lot of them start to feel the same after a while, and I think we need different kinds of movies out there.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So as we go into our final thoughts as we wrap up this discussion on $1 Million Baby, Rob, what are your final thoughts on the film?
It's a movie that, I mean, it has a lot of the same kind of uplifting moments as Rocky, but then ends on a way more sour note. But I mean, it makes you, like I said, it gives you like really interesting moral questions, and I love movies that do that make you kind of, as an audience member, kind of decide what you would do in a situation. I think it helps you put your head in these characters' bodies and kind of like, or no, what's the saying? Feet and shoes.
What? Put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yes, there.
All right.
Sorry, but
I'm keeping that whole part in.
No, you should. But I like the movie a lot. I think it was really good. I think I would give it a 4.4 out of 5.
Nice. My final thoughts are, I thought this was a really good movie. I really enjoyed this a lot. I thought the direction was fantastic. I thought all the performances were great. I thought the boxing scenes, probably out of all the movies, Rocky and Raging Bull, now this is probably the most brutal and visceral
Probably
boxing
the best
scenes.
out of all three of them.
Yeah, I think the choreography and everything was probably at its best. And probably that helps that it's been so many years removed from those other films. But I thought the human dynamics and the human drama of it, the relationship between Maggie and Frankie was probably the strongest element of this movie. There were a couple of side things that didn't work for me as much that I thought kind of distracted from what was the main meat of the story. But then it takes that giant turn at the end, and it really does end on a down note, which is a risky move, but I think it's what worked for this movie and what was best for this movie. And if I were to give it a rating, I would give it a 4.3 out of 5.
Nice.
So that has been our discussion of $1 Million Baby. We are almost done with our month of boxing movies.
Wow.
We have one more left.
Well, I honestly have no clue what it is. You're gonna have to
No
tell me.
clue? The movie...
We probably talked about it, but I forgot about it.
The movie we're talking about...
Oh, The Fighter. Is it that?
It's The Fighter,
Oh, okay.
yes.
All right. That one, interesting. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've never fully watched the whole thing.
Oh, really?
So that's another, yeah.
And it's funny, we've talked about, like, with all these movies, there being human drama with the backdrop of boxing. That's, like, all that The Fighter is. It's, like, really? Just drama going on.
Like, so, I know the ending of that one, but, I never actually, fully watched it all.
Yeah. So, well, you will now.
Yeah. And it takes place in our own backyard almost.
Yeah. So, The Fighter will be the next film we talk about, and that will cap off our month of boxing movies. So, be sure to watch The Fighter and then come back next Wednesday for our discussion of...
Watch it right on Netflix.
Yeah. Come back for our discussion of 2011's The Fighter. Once again, I'm your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'd like to thank Rob Giachinta for being here. Thanks, as always, for being here.
No problem.
Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Be sure to follow us on all of our various social medias at Movie Paradise 99, and you can also follow our social media for Movie Night Tonight at Movie Night TNT. That's Movie Night TNT. Last Monday, Monday, just a couple days ago, we had the newest episode of Film Thoughts drop, where I talked about, I was kind of wondering, in a retrospective, why was there so much backlash against the Joker?
Yeah, why?
Yeah, so I talked about that in the episode.
And find out,
you can go listen to that. And then this Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live on YouTube, check out the Movie Paradise show. And then, of course, next Wednesday, the next episode of Movie Night Tonight drops, where we talk about The Fighter. So until our next podcast, or until our next live show, thanks for listening.